Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today, I'm pleased to present a timely discussion with Jodi Aman. Jodi is a licensed clinician social worker, YouTuber, and inspirational speaker with 23 years' experience working with families. In that time, she has helped countless children, teens, and adults heal from trauma, anxiety, and depression, a battle she too fought and won. In addition to therapy services, Jodi has spoken at conferences, retreats, schools, and universities throughout the world, and gave a popular TEDx Wilmington talk, Calm Anxious Kids. She is also the author of You Won Anxiety Zero, Win Your Life Back from Fear and Panic, which has been credited with helping change how we view the current mental health crisis. Jodi's new book, Anxiety, I'm So Done With You, A Teen's Guide to Ditching Toxic Stress and Hardwiring Your Brain for Happiness, teaches Gen Z how to feel worthy, empowered, and in control through practical, tried-and-true techniques. Though written for teens, it's also an invaluable resource for parents, teachers, and other adult figures. In this time of great uncertainty, one thing is for sure. You can take back control. Jodi Aman is here to teach you how. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show today. I'm very happy to be in conversation with Jodi Aman, who is the author of Anxiety, I'm So Done With You, which is out right now. I am going to hold up a picture on my Kindle really quick, and Jodi might actually hold up the physical book a little bit later in the show. But there it is. So get it. You can get it in paperback. It's coming out digitally as well. So welcome to the show, Jodi. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I was saying before we started recording, and I'll come back to this in a minute if you don't mind, but it really is sort of a strange time to be ushering a book out into the world. But also considering the topic of your book, it's sort of strange and almost appropriate and poetic in a way.
Yeah.
And I am going to come back to that in a minute because I think we do have to talk about the times since they are anxiety inducing for all of us, not just teens. But I wanted to start by flipping the script a little bit because you're very big on, perspective and what the person can bring to the situation. And I know that one of the questions you're probably asked most frequently is, what is anxiety? But I want to sort of reverse that and, get rid of some of the misconceptions. So can you tell us what anxiety is not?
Well, anxiety is such a weird word because people really describe it all different ways. So, anxiety is to, you believe anxiety is to what you understand anxiety is, but I could put my definition out and I feel like anxiety is not something that helps you. I think anxiety is not something that protects you. I think anxiety is not something that's useful in any way. And I think that those are the biggest myths that people keep anxiety because they think it's protecting them somehow, or they think that they will be prepared for something bad if they're, they don't want to get rid of their anxiety because they think there's something good about it. I think that's the biggest one.
Right. And then I know in your book, you talk about, people thinking of it as, maybe a mental illness or a chemical imbalance and all these sort of stigmatizing terms that can really sort of defeat the person rather than help them.
Exactly. Yes, that's true too. I forgot about that part. Yeah, we really think that it's a mental illness and something that, we have to have forever. Our brain's just wired that way and we have to stay like them. We just have to manage it. That's not true. Like anybody's mind could get hooked on anxiety thoughts and the suffering's intense. So it's not like there's people with mental illness that have a real suffering and then there's regular worry. I don't think that there's that dichotomy at all because then, because any of us could get hooked. If you really understand what anxiety is doing to us, you realize that anyone could get hooked. And I think that takes the stigma out of it. A lot of people who are like mental health advocates want to be like, but mine's different. That's not helping you to think that way. And actually it's increasing the stigma, I think. And so now I'm not putting them down, like they're doing such great work out there, but I don't know if it's serving them. Because when you defend your limitations, you keep those limitations. And I think that there is a lot of ability to move forward and relieve ourselves of this suffering. And I think that's the message we really want to tell people.
Sure. And so I did want to ask you too. So this book is, specifically written for a teen audience, and this will be sort of a multi-part question. I do that sometimes. So if you forget the second part of the question, feel free to ask me to remind you, and I'll
Okay.
say, "Ah, I forgot too."
Thanks.
I did want to ask you. I know that you have a special sort of affinity for teenagers, and I know that you've experienced anxiety as a child and as a teen yourself. So you're not just coming at this as somebody who's not been in the trenches and worked her way out of it. But I wanted to ask you, one, why is it that you specifically wanted to target a young adult audience for this book? But also, on the flip side, how can it be a resource for the adults in a teen's life?
Oh, that's a great question, because I did have a lot of parents read it to give me some feedback, but they have all told me that they've learned so much that could help them move forward in helping their kids, because parents feel out of control because kids' anxiety is skyrocketing and they think they're the only ones. A lot of my friends are like, oh my gosh, this book will really help me because my kid's struggling. I'm like, yeah, all kids are struggling.
Yeah.
I mean, they all are, but we think we're the only ones. But it's really, really helpful. There's a lot of resources for parents in the book, and then linked to, like, in the back of the book, the kids are supposed to cut out this section, give it to their parents. The parents are going to have some resources, but I like the parents to read the whole book, actually. But the reason why I wrote this book for teens, and I will hold it up. The reason why I wrote this book for teens is because, Generation Z, they have a really particular they have a really particular experience in this world with commercialism rising, having the device in their hands. So having that access to all of these messages that we're getting all the time, like comparison culture, violence happening, commercials saying you should just get this, like instant gratification. And so they're losing that concept of cause and effect, and they're not connected with their own skills and abilities. And so this book is going to remedy that. Like, it's really trying to connect people, tell kids that they're as great as they are. Kids have amazing potential. They're wonderful. They could do so much. Our brains are highly adaptable, but we've forgotten all that, especially these young people. And that's why we're in such a mental health crisis that we are right now.
Sure. Yeah, and I think too, to speak to that, that looks great. I'm glad the book finally arrived.
Yay, right.
Watching some of your videos, you're like, the box is coming. It's not here yet. It'll be here soon.
I'm in a box of like hundreds on Friday. Yeah, it's so cool, because usually as an author, you get your book ahead of time so you can use it in your book trailer and promote it a little bit. But because of COVID, the warehouses were really behind and different things. And so I did not have a physical copy of the book for the release, which, became a story in and of itself. But so last night I opened it live on Instagram. I saw it for the first time, and it's so big. The book is so big, but there's write-in sections, there's pictures. So if a teen scrolls through the book, it doesn't look intimidating. It's like, I'm not going to read this whole thing, because there's a lot of, space and places that make it really user-friendly, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And I read it on PDF, which was sort of a little bit of a bigger presentation, but you're right. And I am going to come back and ask you a little bit about those interactive sort of portions or elements in a little bit. But it is nice to have, the space to work with and not have to worry about a hand cramp or running out of room. But, you mentioned COVID-19, and we've already touched on this briefly, but I did want to, come back to that, because it is such a weird time, and there is so much uncertainty, and that's, I think, a trigger for anxiety in a lot of us, and can be particularly, I think, impactful for teens, just because they're used to sort of maybe having their social circle, their school, their sports, and there are a lot of things that they might not be able to access the way that they could, a few months ago. So can you speak a little bit, about anxiety in the times that we're in, and also the fact that just because, many of us do have to social distance, that doesn't mean that we really necessarily have to be distant from one another?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think the social distancing or not having those structures in life got rid of our connection to other people. It lessened, right? We have a lot of losses. There's nothing to look forward to. And that's taken kind of our sense of purpose. So for young people, they don't have like a reason for their day and they feel a bit untethered. And when they're untethered, first of all, their brain has more space because there's not much to do to go to those negative thoughts. And also it just feels like, how are we going to get back to it? And I do notice that people's comfort zones are getting smaller, so as they're staying home, they're managing okay, but then it's harder to like go outside. All of a sudden their comfort zone shrunk, and the things they used to do, which was fine and easy, it's a challenge right now. And I wanted to let people know that that comes back, so I've seen people shrink their comfort zone, but very easily we change it. Like our comfort zone is really changing all the time. And so it can come back. And I think if you know that it can come back, it helps a little bit. It
Right.
helps us make those steps outside of it. But it is important to do that. It is important to keep stretching that comfort zone, because it could get smaller and smaller. And then it's more challenging. It's still doable, but it's more challenging. We don't need more challenges right now.
Right.
We need our lives to get a little bit easier. So yeah, all the losses, the lack of connection, the lack of structure gives us a lack of purpose. And then there's a lack of novelty. And so all of those things really contribute to exhaustion. People are more and more tired and then unmotivated. So it's like, because there's not a lot of stuff to do, like we lose motivation even to try to do new stuff. And so it's harder to do those new things. And when I say new things, I mean like learn something new, create a project, get involved in an art project or something, or rearrange your room. It's hard to do that stuff because we're losing motivation.
Right.
And that is a symptom of isolation, actually. And so I think it's important for people to know that that's why we're unmotivated and tired, is because we're isolated. Like, we're not meant to be isolated. It is exhausting and it is heavy on us. And so yeah, so you mentioned at the end there that it's important to connect even. And so, yeah, it's important to be creative in the ways you connect with people. There is ways to connect outside with people and still social distance. Don't, don't let just, it feels like too much work or something, dissuade, because you need that. Like, we need that to bring our energy up. We need to connect with other people. We need to connect with them on video, keep something regular, have a project together if you can. Oh, sorry.
No,
I'm sorry
not.
about that noise. I apologize.
Oh,
That was
not at
probably
all.
really loud.
This is the fun of filming. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So, so I hope that I think I finished answering that question. Like, we need to connect with people. You
Right.
need to be out with your family. You need to be interacting. You need to be playing games, doing something creative, having a project for yourself and with other people if you can.
Right. And the interesting thing about that is, one of the points in your book, and something that I found myself relating to, is we're all so used to being connected through devices, phones and tablets and this and that. And I think we're seeing more and more the good and the bad of that. Because, saying in the book that people really need to take a break from their phones. And I can appreciate that, because I remember, all the times that the phone was the signifier of all of the, anxiety producing things in my life, whether it's all the people who were calling out from work that we were going to have to deal with, or family health crises. Like, literally every time the phone would ring, ding, whatever, I knew that it was bringing me some kind of problem. And that's before you think about, scrolling Facebook and Twitter and seeing all these really, really terrible things. But on the other hand, especially in a time where we're socially distanced and a lot of us are isolating in our houses, that is our primary means of communication. For instance, I'm talking to you today through Zoom, and I never would have imagined before this happened that I would be doing like an author interview show, online. It just wasn't something I really considered. And it turns out it's a really simple, alternative to doing something like this in real time, in a physical space together. So can you talk a little bit about the good and the bad of devices, and how we can sort of moderate that now that we really do need them, but we sort of need to be conscious of how we're using them?
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about consciousness because they're not going to go away. We're not going to be like, teens should get rid of their phones. Like, it's just not going to happen. So it's about understanding what the problems are and what the risks are, because then you could eliminate them. It's understanding what they do. If you understand the impact on yourself, you could really shift that impact in huge ways, so that there's hope and everything out here. But there's ways we connect on social media and on the devices. There's ways to connect with other people, and then there's ways to consume. And so I think that makes a little bit of difference. And I consume stuff, like I watch videos, and I passively watch things, of course. But if you're doing that more, then you're actively engaging, right? So either putting out content like you are, or making videos, or talking to people, even if you're not recording it and putting out content. If you're actually talking to people, it's a totally different use of the device than if you're just consuming. And so if people spend hours and hours and hours days consuming, you're just comparing yourself to that, or you're consuming things that might be traumatic for you, or you or you're thinking like, you're just feeling different, right? It just makes you feel so different from everybody else because you see people's highlight reel, and you
Right.
compare it to your backstage mess, or you feel more and more alone because online in these videos, everyone seems like to have people and be confident and be wonderful. And then, and everyone loves them, and you feel more and more lonely. And so if you're only consuming, it's too much.
Sure.
And so if you're participating or you're talking to people, that's never, it's when people are scrolling is when their energy lowers. And they've done research on this, but when they're participating and talking to people, it doesn't. So if my daughter she's 16, and she goes on a walk and she's talking to friends on the phone, it's like there's a connection. It's not like, oh, you're on the device.
Right.
That's totally different
Right.
use of the device. And so there needs to be a little bit more of a balance. But in the book, I explain like what are the problems, and so you could see them. And I think that's what teens need. They really need to really understand something, because you can't be like, don't use this, it's bad for you. They're not gonna, they need to know exactly why,
Right.
to do something about it.
Sure. And so something I wanted to ask you about too, so the name of the book is Anxiety. I'm so done with you, and you can hold it up again, and there are people who are going to look at that and they're going to think, well, it's not that simple. And I don't mean to oversimplify anything, but one of the points of the book is it almost can be that simple, in the sense that once you realize that you are in control of the situation and, you have your own agency, you have the power to rein it in. So I was hoping, you could talk a little bit about the importance of us, all of us realizing the power that we have to recognize and manage our anxiety, because that's really where it starts, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Anxiety, I'm so done with you. And you can see my other book, like my first book, which is for all ages, is like U1 Anxiety 0. So that's like definitive, like you could get rid of it completely. I really believe that people could cure themselves of anxiety or get rid of it, because what's happening, so it's a cultural problem. It's not a mental health problem, it's a cultural problem. So we're learning anxiety, and anxiety has so much power over us. And I use it like that. Like I personify anxiety because I want to externalize it outside of a person. You can see that in both of my titles, right? So Anxiety, I'm so done with you, right? So anxiety is personified because right there from the title, I'm starting the therapy, right? I'm
Right.
taking it out because we really internalize our problems. You think I am anxious, like it's me, it's our identity. And so the first thing we need to do is take it out of there and realize it's something that influences us, that lies to us, that tries to get us under its control. And it disconnects us with our own sense of our skills and abilities. Like we don't know that we have any power, because anxiety all the time is telling us that we're powerless, we're out of control, we're worthless, we can't handle it. All these things that anxiety tells us constantly. And so we lose touch with our own skills and abilities. Really young people, they have huge skills, but they don't see them. And then the adults are like, oh my gosh, we're so worried about you. You're so entitled. And then they, it kind of doubles down. They think, oh yeah, I am a problem. Like I really can't do anything. And the parents are like, taking things off the kids' plates because the kids are anxious. And it's like, it's doubled again, it's like tripled down. And so I think that's the biggest message I have is if we could get in touch with her, because we feel like a lot of the gurus or the thought leaders are saying to us, we need to just surrender. We need to just let go of what we don't have control over. That doesn't really help someone with anxiety. When you have anxiety, you don't want to focus on things you don't have control over. Actually, that's what anxiety wants you to do, is focus on all the things you don't have control over. But there's like more things that you do have control over, but we don't see. It's like whatever you pay attention to. Anxiety wants you to pay attention to all the things you have no control over, but there's so much you do. And I think that's the shift we want to make, is really connecting people to their personal agency, that they could respond in life, and that they have 100% of control over that, 100% of control over their response to life. And that response actually means more than anything else that happens to them. So we're trying to teach people like they're not a passive recipient of life. That's even like when they're consume stuff online, they just feel like this passive recipient to it. Right. And we're not passive recipients of life. We respond. And so I think that's what this book does that might be a little bit different than other things, is that it shows people and connects them with their personal agency. So it's lasting, one of the subtitles of the book we were going to say lasting happiness, like it's sustainable. Right. It's not just like you calm yourself and then when anxiety comes again, you have to learn to calm yourself again. And when anxiety comes, you calm yourself. This book like gives you sustainable skills for, hardwiring your brain for happiness, like changing the whole story. Right. of how you feel about yourself in the world. And that's sustainable.
Sure. So actually, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead in my question, because something that you said led me forward a little bit, because you actually, if you don't mind talking about it, you sort of have a 3-step process to taking the past, the troublesome things in the past, and being able to get past them and let them go. And that doesn't mean that you don't recognize or acknowledge them for what they are, but it's actually your 3rd step in that process that's the one that can help make the difference. And it's the thing that a lot of people, seem to miss. They're maybe good at 1 and 2, and they don't think about 3. So would you mind, sharing
Sure.
what that is?
Sure. And actually, if anyone wants to come over to my website, jodiaman.com, jodiaman.com and /let-go, I have a free MP3 that really goes into this process of how to let go, because I think a lot of people don't teach it. The first step to letting go is knowing, and I'm going to say it quickly here, but if you want to go in depth, because I think it's really important, this is something that we do not learn, but it's so incredibly helpful. The first process is like, know you deserve it, to understand you deserve it. And then the second step is to let that go, like do the intention. And everyone thinks that that's it. Like we just set the intention to let go and that's all, then we're done. But the third step is practicing. So I really explain how we have this habit of these energy coming back or these thoughts coming back, and we have to keep practicing without any attachment, like without any negative self-judgment. And we don't know how to do that, but it's so easy. So I break it down in really practical ways to how, we don't keep practicing. We think if we let go and then it comes back, we failed at letting go. But you have to expect it to come back, because that's just what our brain does. That's what our mind does. And so when it comes back, there's a process to practicing to keep releasing that. But to really not pay attention to it, to not engage in that content anymore, not engage in those thoughts anymore. And we have a habit of engaging in those negative thoughts. And I think that's another thing that this book stands aside, is because it helps us stop engaging in those thoughts. And that's really, really important.
Sure. And that leads me to another point that I thought I would bring up, but we talked a little bit before about, the interactive elements to the book. Like every segment sort of ends with a what's in your hand, and it's sort of practical applications, which is really cool. And it also lends itself to, like, one of the things you talk about in the book is practice and the idea that there is no failure in practice, because a lot of times people don't want to consider even doing something because they think, well, if I fail at it, I'm going to feel even worse. So can you talk about the exercises and the writing that's involved in the book and how that supports the idea of there not being failure in practice, but practice is really the key to success, actually?
Yeah, because we think we have to do stuff. We really set ourselves up for failure because we just have these high expectations. This is another cultural problem that's causing a lot of our emotional unwellness, is these high expectations we have, these standards we have that we have to live up to, and they're outrageous, right? We have to be perfect and beautiful and cool and, have everything together and whatever, right? So we have these really high standards, and we think that if we don't meet those standards, that we're going to be called out and we're not going to belong in our culture. People will be like, I don't want to be with them. They're not good enough. And so it's really important to meet these and not fail, but they're outrageous. So we're always finding ourselves inadequate. This is a huge problem because when we think we're inadequate, we don't trust ourselves, and then we think we can't handle anything. This is why anxiety is huge. And so because I had anxiety for 20 years, I cured myself of it. And this is still 20 years ago that I'm better. And I've spent the last 20 years teaching my clients the same 6 steps that I taught myself to cure anxiety. And so these are tried and true exercises. These are exercises that get us to bring out for ourselves what we want to see, what's covered up. Anxiety just kind of covers up everything that's good about you or everything that you're able and all these things. And so these exercises are tried and true, and they help you bring out those things. And the benefit of writing is then we become a witness of ourselves. And when you become a witness of yourself, you get to have a new perspective of it, like a widened perspective, like a big picture view. Everything looks different from that view. And from that view, you're not in the chaos of it. And so the emotions are much calmer, and you could just see things much better. And you're easier on yourself. You're easier on other people. You could see the outs. You can understand stuff. This is the thing. A lot of anxieties because we don't understand the world. And we're kind of caught up in I don't know why this happens. I don't know why this happens. And it's so anxiety provoking. In this book and in these exercises, they're really, there's a lot of space in here. So don't get intimidated by how big this book is, because there's pictures and there's diagrams and there's space to write. And so there's blank pages in the beginning of the chapter. So it really doesn't make it, look at, this is about your comfort zone where, you do an exercise to try to see what are in different layers of your comfort zone. So it's really practical. And I think that's why people like me as a teacher, is because I really am practical. It's not esoteric,
Right.
It's not well, just let go and, just don't worry about it. I tell you exactly how to do it. And that's why the exercises were so important in here. They
Right.
give you something to do, and to do it, because we also have anxiety about different things. We all have different triggers, right? So this makes it personal to you, right? So this helps cure your anxiety because you're writing about your particular thoughts and what anxiety is saying, and really deconstructing that. Wow, I have a lot to say about it, I guess. It's so exciting, right? It's so exciting. The potential of this book will really bring out the potential of this generation. And I think wow, I'm going to save these people 20 years of hardship, right? If they get this now, people take 20 years to learn this stuff, and they're in their 30s finally saying, okay, I like myself.
Right.
And meanwhile, they just spent the last 20 years in difficult relationships and feeling bad and missing opportunities and whatever, right? Making all the mistakes. And that's okay too. It's great to make mistakes, and I'm not going to make your life perfect, but it's going to be a lot better than if you feel really bad about yourself and you attract people who treat you bad. That stinks. Let's not do that. Let's save this generation from having to do that. And I also think, when I was writing the book, I did a lot of ceremony. I'm an energy healer, and I did a lot of ceremony to really try to connect the vibration of this book to the healing that these kids need. And so even holding it in their hands, or even if they read it on Kindle, they're going to get that vibration from it, and they're going to heal in I believe in, I always think about epigenetics. I don't know if you know this, but like we hold on 14 generations of trauma. And so think of the last 14 generations, like even from the history we know there's been horrible trauma in the last 14 generations, right? And even before. But if we could do this work and it heals them, it will heal them on that DNA level. Like we could heal that and not pass it along.
Yeah, and how great would
So
that be?
if this generation heals that before they start, generating the next generation, then wow, look at the potential that this book could do. And I think that's why it was really important to hit this age group.
Yeah, and it's, not funny, haha, that you should say that, but it really is all about, the cycles and breaking the cycles, whether it's generational cycles or, cycles within ourselves. And as you mentioned, the sooner that you can do that and the sooner that you're equipped to do that, kind of the better for, for everybody involved. You don't have to speak to that because you already did. But another thing, I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about is, again, people get so sort of caught up in the definition of anxiety and what it is or what it isn't. And there's a lot of confusion between anxiety and fear, which are two different things that sort of go together. But I see fear as maybe being sort of the dirty F word. That can really mess you up. I mean, it can be really, really good when fear is necessary, but when you can't let it go and you're not actually in a dangerous situation, that can sort of start its own spiral. So can you speak briefly to the difference between the two and how they can both serve each other and not?
Yeah. Well, so I define anxiety as the leftover fear response when you're not in physical danger. So it's a leftover symptoms of the adrenaline in your body and in your mind, because the adrenaline actually makes those thoughts more, that rapid fire and that rumination, that is actually also from the adrenaline, and it causes more release of adrenaline, those negative thoughts. So I think that's important to remember, because people think that they have to control it. Like the thoughts coming is part of that symptoms, right? So anxiety is the effect on our body of an increase of adrenaline. And I call the anxiety that increase of adrenaline when we're not in physical danger. Because if we were in physical danger, it would be our fear response and our adrenaline going. And then we would do that, whatever we needed to do to survive. We would take that action.
Right.
And so we'd be so busy taking the action, your mind doesn't get caught in the helplessness of anxiety, of feeling that panic when there is nothing to do because you're safe.
Right.
That's the difference. So there's the fear response, which is what's happening in our body to stimuli. And they see like 98% of the time we have our fear response go off and we're not in physical danger. And it was supposed to be a process of like your prefrontal cortex noticing that everything's okay and telling your mind to calm down. But now we're feeling that stress in our bodies and we think we're in danger. So we keep perpetuating the adrenaline release. So I go really deep into the biology of anxiety because I think it's so helpful for people in my book and in my programs. I have a lot of online programs that help people. But so it's really important to understand what's happening. But so that's how I define anxiety. Fear could be defined in a lot of ways. Like there could be fears like a noun, things that you're afraid of, fears. There's the fear response. That's the physical, like the sympathetic nervous system response. I use that term fear response. And then fear in general is like a sense of, being afraid of something. And that is different for everybody. People use that word as a describer. And so I think we have to start using these words as a description of what we feel, because when we use it as a label, there's no universal definition of what everyone thinks this is. And so it's really confusing. Anxiety is the same way. Like I use anxiety as a descriptor. I mean, I use it personified, because that really helps take it outside of us. So then in a way that's an entity, but I also, I don't like to use diagnoses because I don't think they're helpful. I mean, diagnoses are just for payment. That's really what the only really good use of it. In traditional mental health, it's like the diagnosis tells you what kind of treatment to do. I don't think that's how it works anymore. There's probably still people that believe that, but it's a way to describe how somebody's feeling. They're feeling anxious or they have some, their anxiety is high. Yeah. So I hope that really helps. I think that is a really difficult thing, because if you're trying, like if you have a book about anxiety or programs about anxiety, nobody knows if it's for them, because people really don't know if their anxiety is regular anxiety or if their anxiety is like a mental health anxiety. Is this for anxiety disorder? And so it becomes a really difficult word even to market to.
Sure.
But I describe anxiety as like, and a lot of people read my book, like friends of mine, when I had my first book come out, a lot of my friends read it and they're like, I didn't even know I had anxiety. And it's not like to label people. It's not like taking on problems you didn't already have. These problems are there. It's just that we call it all different things. Like we call it resistance, or we call it shyness, or we could call it a million, embarrassment, or we could call it so many different things, but we don't have to suffer. No matter what you call it. If something is stopping you from enjoying your life as fully as you possibly can, then you could get help and get rid of that. That's the message. It's like, you don't have to like have a real anxiety disorder to get help or something.
Right.
If it's stopping you at all, there's tons and tons of help out there.
Sure. And actually, I wasn't sure if I was going to broach this topic, but I think it sort of goes hand in hand with what you were discussing. In the book too, you sort of discuss, medications and the myths around medication, and, how really it should be considered before somebody decides whether or not they're going to, introduce that either into their own bodies or to somebody else's. So would you mind just talking briefly about the benefits and risks of what medication can be and the things that people should consider before making that choice?
Yes. So let me just explain the risks and benefits. I think anytime you're making a decision, I think the myth out there is that you need this, right? So that's the myth, is like, you need this. And like, there's not really a choice in that. If you need that, you don't make a choice. But instead, I want to introduce the idea that there's risks and benefits to this medicine, and you could choose it. So first of all, we're putting the agency back in the person, instead of like, you have a chemical imbalance, you just need this. Then you feel bad because you need it, and you take it like with a lot of guilt because you're ashamed that you need it, right? And it's not helping, like you're digesting that shame when you're taking that medicine. And so it's not really helpful. But if you speak about it, but it's like, that's not true for this medicine. A lot of times they compare it to diabetes and insulin, but it's not a good comparison. There's no parallel to those two problems at all in the ways the medicine works. There's just no parallel. And actually back in the 70s, they told pharmaceuticals they had to get rid of that metaphor out of their marketing. But I feel like, practitioners are still telling their patients this. So the message is, if it's not written on their websites, okay, because they can't do that, but like, they're still passing this narrative around. And there's no parallel at all to that. So when you're when you're deciding, what are the risks? Like, you can't do anything. Like, you can't get out of bed. You really want to die. Like you really can't. You really have no energy or motivation even to doing the things that you need to do to kind of get your life back. Then medicine is a great option. I mean, it is tool. It is a tool. There's a lot of tools to get better from anxiety and depression, and it is definitely a tool, and it saves lives. So I don't want to underestimate the fact that it saves lives, and it is an important tool to have in our society. But if we think about it as a tool that we can make a choice, right? So there is risk to it, obviously, because, our liver has to process that, and there might be some side effects, and it affects different people different ways. And it only works on 57% of the people. So we think you need this medicine, but then if it doesn't work for you, it's very confusing. Excuse me.
Sure.
So, so it's very confusing. So you really want to understand what it does. And they don't even know how it works, right? So it works for 57% of the people, and they're really not sure exactly how it works on their body. Like, we don't understand the chemical ways it's working, but it does work for 57% of the people. And so it's worth it to have it as a tool. I'm not wanting to get rid of it altogether. It's just how we think about it, because we could keep our agency around medicine instead of giving that up. When you think that you have this mental illness and there's nothing you can do about it,
right,
then you don't feel like, again, you're this message that you're a passive recipient of life. You just got the bad hand.
right.
And that's, like most of our emotional problems come out of a context, actually all of them, either the context in our own mind, like that negative thinking, or the context of our life, like a lot of trauma that we have. And so people are thinking that they have this on top of the trauma they experience, that they have this mental illness that's genetic or something. And then they have to take, it's like you're doubly, victimized in this world, and that's a trauma again. So I think it's important for people to really understand our emotional problems. And like, I even try to stay away from the word mental health sometimes because it's so widely misunderstood about what it is. I mean, mental health literally means being mentally healthy, right? And we all want that, right? But it's got this negative like spin to it.
Right. And I think there's, some element of sort of self-fulfilling prophecy too. Like I've known people, who've been in treatment, who've taken medication. And I'm not saying that that's bad. It's not for me to say. But then, they also sometimes will say, well, I have a condition. I can't do anything about it. And it's like, well, you can, but now you think that this is who you are and what defines you, and sort of it's perpetuating, the cycle rather than allowing you to, like you said, take ownership.
Exactly. And I think the practitioners have good intentions. I think they want to help people take the stigma away. So they're using the metaphor of diabetes to take the stigma away. It's like, it's not your fault. And so I get that. I like the intention part, and I get that. But I think that it's really telling people that they're different than other people. And I think the consequences of that is so much worse. So initially you could take some of the shame away, but the shame's still there. We're really not taking that shame away, right? So it's like you're constantly kind of making excuses for the shame, but you're fighting inside your head. Like, I wish it's so awful that I have this, but no, it's not my fault. It's awful that I have this. No, it's not my fault. Like, people are just, that's huge amount of suffering. This way we like defend ourselves and berate ourselves, and defend ourselves and berate ourselves. And so I think it adds to the problem much more. I mean, I've been doing this for 23 years, and I've seen how it affects people to think about their problems in this kind of way. It is not helpful.
Right. Right. And it's like, even when you think about it, somebody who does have a diagnosed medical condition, like you mentioned, diabetes, okay, you might be on medication and that might help you, but also then you consider things like, well, are you going to change your diet? Are you going to exercise? Are you going to do other things that are within your control that are beyond, a medical intervention that might help you? And I think I found, in my elder years here, that the one word I keep coming back to every time life throws me something really, really difficult is perspective. Like, I think it's all about perspective and sort of understanding that there are going to be certain situations or things that happen to us that we can't control, but we do always, have the power to control how we respond to those things. And if we don't, forget that we possess that power, I think that can be, really empowering.
Exactly. That's great.
But anyway, just a couple more questions for you, and then I will let you go, because I know you are, all over the social world these days sharing your message with it, which I think is a really, really important one. So maybe just two more questions.
Sure.
If you don't mind. Actually, maybe three. But I'm wondering, now that people are sort of stuck at home, can you just give us some simple, guidance as to what steps children can take or parents can help their children with, and just sort of developing healthy habits to stay connected and to sort of cope? What are, simple things we can do to increase our mindfulness when we may not be able to leave our houses as we normally would?
Yeah, I think there's three things that I usually say. One is routine. I think bringing the routine back is so important, because we used to have all that structure that gave us routine, and now we're off. Like, people are sleeping later, everything's kind of shifted. There's a lot of fluidity in our day, but our minds are craving a routine. And when you have a routine, it could be a loose routine, but if you have a routine, like you wake up at the same time, you exercise at the same time, you eat at the same time, you work, play at the same time. When you have a little bit of a structure, it really helps the mind be like, okay, I don't have to worry about that. Because their mind's like, what's going on? What's going on? And it settles the mind. It's almost like if you have a lot of clutter, your mind's worse than if you have a neat place around. It does settle the mind. Same with your schedule. So, so that's one. In that routine, I'm talking about movement, getting movement in, getting good sleep in. Everyone's having trouble sleeping now, and so it's more important to sleep and stay away from screens in the evening, stay away from a lot of caffeine, in the afternoon or evening. And so we really want to kind of boost up our sleep hygiene. So routines, number one. The second thing is having a sense of purpose. Like, we've lost our sense of purpose in a lot of ways and things to look forward to. We need to have some kind of project, some kind of goal. Teens need a goal for the summer. So all the teens that I'm working with, I still work with people privately. You could come to my website, jodiaman.com. I work with all ages, so not just teens. And I'm a family therapist, so couples, adults, kids, teens, I love it all. But if they have a sense of purpose, some kind of goal, all of my clients have a goal for the summer. Because if you don't have a goal, you're untethered, and it doesn't feel really good to our well-being. In every happiness, study around the world, a sense of purpose is one of the top two things you need to be happy. And the other thing to be happy is to be around uplifting people. So you have to stay connected, and do things for others and do projects with people. And we have to get creative because sometimes it's got to be online, making some kind of video project with somebody or something. And then the third thing, so the first is routine, the second is purpose, and the third is novelty. I guess this could go with purpose a little bit because we need some novelty in our days, like every day, in our week. So you don't have to do it every day necessarily, but something new and different. Especially, we're not sheltering home right now. Before we were sheltering home, we have a little more flexibility, but there's still social distancing. So you can't do everything you used to do. But being novel about let's do something that we never did before. Or, you could have done it before, but you don't do it that often. Go to a place that's been different, go to this beach, you maybe drive 45 minutes to go to this lake to see it. Something novel, or learning something new, that really helps boost our robustness, our robust mental healthness. Like, you really want to, I want to say robustify, but I don't think that's I don't think that's a verb, but I feel like we want to robustify ourselves, because you're seeing a lot of the when we don't have robustness, that's when there's a lot of division among people. Like, a lot of fear is creating, people blaming others, and you're seeing that a lot in our country right now. And so if we get robustness in ourselves, those conflicts will go down. And that, I think, is really, really important right now. And they don't think that you don't see that as a lack of robustness. Actually, if you're like, I'm not afraid, and it seems like you're afraid and I'm not afraid. No, I'm socially responsible, and I have no fear, but I'm totally socially responsible. But people who are, blaming other people for not being afraid or whatever. I don't know. It's just really, we really have to, center in to our sovereign power and our abilities, our intuition, our connection, our trust in ourselves to really navigate this time. We can do it. We all have the ability to do it, and it's going to make a difference. And so, I don't know, adults may be set in their ways. Teens are open to being like, I want to feel better. And so that's why this book is for them.
Sure. I like that, robustify. I think that should be your next book. But it's
Robustify.
Yeah, I like that. But it's so true, because you think about all the things that you can do now that you wouldn't even have thought about doing before. Like, okay, I might not be able to leave my home to go to the museum, but I might be able to take a virtual tour, of the museum from the safety and comfort of home, which is really kind of cool.
Right.
So last two questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One, hopefully I'm not opening Pandora's box. I don't mean to start a huge discussion, but I think, in a time where there's a lot of, social causes and social injustice and people trying to define themselves, you use social identifiers throughout the book, because those things can also, add to people's anxiety or our understanding of their anxiety. So can you just touch upon that really quickly and why you wanted to include those in the book?
Right. So social identifiers, for people don't know, is like gender, like she, her, race, sexual orientation. So anyone I mentioned in the book, including myself, I will give their social identifiers, because, when we don't use those, then some things are invisible, and we need to make those things visible because it's we need to kind of rebalance, when those things are invisible, then the dominant culture is the one that's seen and all the marginalized are not seen. And that is a problem. That's a huge problem that, and it comes from that lack of robustness. Like I said, the dominant, if there's a lack of robustness in the dominant culture, then we're going to try to hold on to that power. And so if we have faith and trust in ourselves and are centered, then we will want to center the marginalized so that there's more, so everybody's included, right? So everybody's seen. And
Right.
so I think that's a really important piece. It's, especially right now. I mean, I wrote this a year ago, but this is not all new. Anti-racism work is not new. It's something that has been around for a really long time. I'm glad it's getting such awareness right now, but it's something that's been important for a really long time to change the way, racism and dominance is about fear.
Sure.
Right? Supremacy is about fear, and so that's a problem. That's actually why I've written about anxiety in the first place. So after working with people for so long, I started to notice that all of our problems in the world are about fear. Fear. And so when you have fear and you feel out of control, you try to either control somebody else or you try to control yourself. And so that's what's going on, right?
Sure.
And so if I wrote about anxiety and I help people get rid of their fear, we can totally change the way we treat people and care about people and go forward in the world and stop traumatizing people, right? And so that's, I think, what's really important. So I started writing about anxiety 10 years ago. I'm hoping that this is really, it's so pertinent right now. The book was ready to go when the Corona pandemic set off. But all that stuff, all the race stuff that was in the book was already in there. All the anti-racist stuff is in there. They let me go back and add some comments about the pandemic because it's so impactful.
Sure.
I was like, this can't come out without mentioning this, but when you traditionally publish, the book's done way ahead. When my other book was self-published and I realized that my name says Jessie on here, but and the recording, my name's Jodi and it says Jessie on here because I went to a client's presentation and I had to keep HIPAA. And so I had to change my name and turn my video off. So that's why my video if it's on YouTube and it says Jessie, my name's Jodi. I just realized that, but it's so funny. So I think that's, I don't know, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about this book and what it's going to do for people. I think it's going to really help.
Yeah, there's so much great potential, and now, is certainly the time for it. So last question for you, and this one's, I've thrown you some hard ones, some really thought-provoking ones, but this one's a little bit easier. I just want to, for people who want to stay connected with you, you have really great energy, enthusiasm, in addition to all the insights that you share so freely. I know I enjoyed watching some of your videos just to sort of get a feel for your personality, and you even do really cool things like occasional live coaching on Facebook where people can chime in with their questions and comments. So for people, looking to connect with you in different ways, can you just quickly mention the best ways and places that they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, so my website is jodiaman.com. I have tons of free videos. I have tons of courses for you. And you could, look into my books there too, jodiaman.com. And I do a live on Facebook, live coaching Mondays at 11. I'm going to try to put that to other platforms. Right now it's just on Facebook, but I'm still, I have a partner starting to come on, but I'm still mostly a one-person show. So there's so much more I could do, but I can't. I'm just one person. I still work full time. So so you could find me on Instagram, on Facebook, and Twitter, and YouTube. But if you come to my website, you could get the link to all of those as well and come play. But so.
Wonderful. Well, I'll see you there, I'm sure. You'll start seeing my name pop up.
I'll love it. That'd be great.
But anyway, thank you so much, Jodi Aman, for doing the show. I really, really enjoyed having you here. And again, the book is Anxiety. I am so done with you, and you can get it right now. And
You
there
can get it right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.